The great library of Centauri Prime stretched for miles beneath the planet's surface. Its crystal walls held the collected knowledge of 1,000 worlds and 10,000 years of galactic history. In the deepest section, where few beings ever ventured, sat rows upon rows of data crystals containing myths, legends, and stories that most civilizations had forgotten. Archivist Kellen moved through these forgotten halls with practiced ease. Her 6 arms worked quickly, sorting through ancient files that had not been touched in centuries. The Althari were known throughout the galaxy as careful record keepers, and Kellen took pride in maintaining even the most obscure pieces of information. She paused at a crystal marked with symbols she barely recognized. The data inside was old, very old. According to the timestamp, it had been filed over 3,000 years ago by a long-dead exploration team. The file was labeled simply, Sol System Extinct Species Report. Kellen touched the crystal with one delicate finger. A holographic display appeared in the air before her, showing rough star charts and basic biological data. The report was short and poorly written, as if the original explorers had been in a hurry to leave. Species designation, human, she read aloud to the empty archive. Planet of origin, 3rd planet from star designated Sol. Status, extinct. Cause of extinction, self-inflicted warfare. Notable characteristics, highly aggressive. Extremely adaptable. Unusually creative problem-solving abilities. Capable of surviving in environments lethal to most known species. The report continued with details that made Kellen's fur stand on end. These humans apparently fought wars that lasted for decades. They lived on a planet where the weather could kill them, the animals hunted them, and even the plants were sometimes poisonous. Yet somehow they had become the dominant species on their world. The most disturbing part was a note at the end. Recommend complete avoidance of Sol System. If humans somehow survived their wars, they would pose significant threat to galactic stability. Their combination of intelligence, aggression, and adaptability is unprecedented in known species. Kellen saved the file and moved on. It was just another story from a dead world. The galaxy was full of such tales. 3 sectors away, Admiral Zektar of the Hegemony Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator. Through the massive viewport, he could see the conquered world of Rigel 7 burning in the distance. Another easy victory for the Hegemony war machine. The Hegemony had broken away from the weak Galactic Federation 50 years ago. While the Federation talked about peace and cooperation, the Hegemony believed in strength. They had better weapons, stronger ships, and most importantly, the will to use them. In 5 decades, they had conquered 67 star systems and enslaved dozens of species. Admiral called Science Officer Vex from his station. We have completed analysis of the Federation archive data we captured from Rigel 7. Zektar did not turn from the viewport. Anything useful? Mostly historical records and cultural databases. However, there is one interesting file. A species report about something called humans from a system called Sol. Never heard of them, Zektar said. Are they a threat? Vex's tentacles writhed in what passed for laughter among his people. Hardly, Admiral. According to this report, they destroyed themselves in primitive wars over 3,000 years ago. The amusing part is that the original explorers seemed terrified of them. Listen to this description. Humans appear capable of fighting even when severely wounded. Observed instances of humans continuing to function with injuries that would incapacitate most species. Recommend extreme caution if contact is ever made. Several bridge officers made sounds of amusement. The idea of primitive beings frightening advanced explorers was ridiculous. Weapons technology? Zektar asked. Chemical explosives and projectile weapons. They had barely achieved faster than light travel when they wiped themselves out. The report mentioned something called nuclear weapons that they used to destroy their own cities. Zektar finally turned from the viewport, his scaled face showing mild interest. They destroyed their own cities? Apparently, Admiral. The explorers found evidence of massive craters where population centers used to be. These humans actually used weapons of mass destruction against their own species. The Admiral considered this. Such ruthlessness was impressive in a primitive way. Most species had enough sense to avoid destroying their own homeworld. But a race that would do such things to themselves would certainly do worse to their enemies. Fascinating, he said, but irrelevant. Dead species cannot threaten the hegemony. Focus on identifying Federation military assets in the next system. The bridge crew returned to their duties, and the file about humans was forgotten. After all, what could an extinct primitive species possibly matter to the greatest military force in the galaxy? On the other side of Federation space, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the UES Defiance, watching stars wheel past as her ship traveled through hyperspace. The Defiance was one of humanity's newest ships, built in the orbital yards above Mars using technology that would have seemed like magic to her ancestors. Sarah was tall and lean, with short dark hair and eyes that had seen too much for someone who looked barely 30. Like all humans who lived in space, she had genetic modifications that allowed her to function in low gravity and radiation, but the modifications were subtle. She still looked completely human. The ship around her was a marvel of engineering, 5 kilometers long and packed with the most advanced technology humanity could build. Its fusion drives could push it to significant fractions of light speed. Its armor was made from materials stronger than diamond. Its weapons could crack open asteroids. To any outside observer, the Defiance looked like a warship. But Sarah and her crew called it an exploration vessel. To humans, there was no real difference between the two. "Captain," came a voice from behind her. Sarah turned to see Commander Jackson, her second in command. "We're getting some interesting readings from the long-range sensors." "What kind of readings?" Sarah asked as they walked toward the bridge. "Radio signals. Organized, artificial. Definitely not natural phenomena." Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly. For 300 years, humanity had been alone in the galaxy. They had spread to dozens of star systems, built cities on hundreds of worlds, and explored thousands of empty planets. But they had never found any sign of other intelligent life. The bridge of the Defiance was a study in controlled chaos. Dozens of crew members worked at stations monitoring everything from stellar navigation to weapons systems. At the center of it all sat the captain's chair, surrounded by holographic displays showing the ship's status and surrounding space. "Show me," Sarah said as she settled into her chair. The main screen filled with wave patterns and frequency analysis. The signals were clearly artificial, but unlike anything in human databases, the mathematical structure was wrong, as if they had been created by minds that thought in completely different patterns. "How long to reach the source?" Sarah asked. 18 hours at current speed, Captain," replied the navigation officer. Sarah stared at the screen for a long moment. Humanity's first contact with alien intelligence. Every human alive had dreamed of this moment. But Sarah had read enough history to know that first contact situations were dangerous. Species meeting for the first time had many reasons to fight and few reasons to trust. "Alert the fleet," she said finally, "and send a message back to Earth. Tell them we may not be alone anymore." The message would take weeks to reach Earth, traveling through a chain of communication relays across human space. But when it arrived, it would change everything. Humanity was about to learn that the galaxy was full of life, most of it older and more advanced than themselves. They were also about to learn that some of that life had very specific ideas about what to do with younger, weaker species. In the depths of the Centauri archives, Archivist Kellen finished her daily rounds and prepared to return to her quarters. As she walked through the ancient halls, she passed thousands of data crystals containing the histories of countless worlds. Most held stories of species that had risen, flourished, and eventually fallen to war, disaster, or simple entropy. She paused again at the crystal containing the human file. Something about it bothered her, though she could not say what. The description of humans as dangerous seemed almost quaint compared to the real threats the galaxy faced. The hegemony had weapons that could destroy planets. They had conquered species with technology far more advanced than anything described in the human file. Yet the original explorers had been frightened enough to recommend avoiding the entire Sol system. That level of caution seemed excessive for a species that fought with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Kellen made a mental note to research the Sol system further when she had time. Ancient mysteries were her specialty, and this one was more intriguing than most. She could not know that in a few short months the mystery would solve itself. The species that the galaxy had dismissed as legend would announce their presence in a way that no one could ignore. And once they did, every military force in known space would understand why those long-dead explorers had been so afraid. The legends were about to become real, and the galaxy was not prepared for what that would mean. Far from the archives and the military meetings on the edge of known space, Something stirred in the darkness between stars. Long-range sensors, if anyone had been watching, would have detected energy signatures unlike anything in galactic databases. Drive systems that burned with fusion fire, cutting through space at speeds that defied expectation. The humans were coming, and they were not coming alone. The Federation colony of New Thessia had been established for over 2 centuries. It was a peaceful world, home to 3 million beings from a dozen different species. The colonists had built their cities in harmony with the planet's natural beauty, creating gardens that stretched between crystalline towers and artificial lakes. Ambassador Lyran stood in the communication center of New Thessia's capital city, staring at the message that had arrived 6 hours ago. She had read it dozens of times, but it still seemed impossible. The message was crude, transmitted on ancient radio frequencies that most modern ships did not even monitor. It consisted of mathematical sequences, basic chemical formulas, and simple pictures drawn in ones and zeros. The meaning was clear to anyone who studied it, a request for peaceful contact from an unknown species. But what made the message remarkable was not its content, but its origin. The signals had come from ships using drive systems that the Federation had abandoned centuries ago. Fusion rockets, of all things. It was like receiving a message from the distant past. "Ambassador," said her aide, a young Althari named Seren. "The Federation Council is requesting an immediate report. They want to know if you believe this is genuine." Lyran ran one slender hand through her silver hair. At 300 years old, she was young for an Althari, but ancient by most species standards. She had handled first contact situations before, but never anything like this. "It's genuine," she said finally. "The mathematical proofs are too complex to be fake, and the engineering signatures are consistent throughout all the transmissions. Someone is out there and they want to talk. Should we respond?" Lyran considered this carefully. Federation protocol required extensive analysis before responding to unknown species. There were committees that needed to meet, experts who needed to consult, and safety procedures that needed to be followed. The process usually took months, but something about these messages felt different. There was an urgency to them, a sense that whoever had sent them was taking a great risk just by making contact. And there was something else, something that made her fur stand on end when she thought about it too much. The mathematical sequences in the messages were not just correct. They were elegant. Whoever had composed them understood advanced physics and mathematics, but they had chosen to communicate using the simplest possible methods. It was like watching a master artist draw with crayons. "Prepare a response," she said. "Basic mathematical sequences and scientific data, nothing that could be considered threatening or too advanced, and begin preparations for a formal first contact meeting." Seren's eyes widened. "Without approval from the council?" "I'll take responsibility," Lyran said. "If I'm wrong, they can remove me from my position. But if I'm right and we delay, we might lose the chance to make peaceful contact with a new species." The response was transmitted 8 hours later. Within 4 hours, they received a reply that made Lyran's decision look prophetic. The unknown ships were requesting permission to enter New Thessia's star system for a formal meeting. They promised to approach slowly with weapons powered down, following whatever protocols the Federation deemed appropriate. More importantly, they had somehow learned enough of the Federation's trade language from their brief exchange to compose their message in broken but understandable galactic standard. The speed of their linguistic analysis was remarkable. 2 days later, Lyran stood on the observation deck of New Thessia's orbital station, waiting for humanity's first formal introduction to galactic civilization. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching ships hours ago, but they were still too distant to see clearly. "Contact in 30 minutes, reported the station's sensor operator. 5 ships moving in formation. Drive signatures consistent with fusion propulsion, but much more advanced than our initial estimates." Lyran nodded, trying to calm her nerves. She had handled dozens of diplomatic situations, but this one felt different. There was something about these newcomers that made her instincts warn of danger, even though they had shown nothing but peaceful intentions. "Visual contact," the operator announced. The main screen filled with an image that made everyone in the observation deck fall silent. The ships approaching New Thessia were unlike anything in Federation databases. They were angular, brutal-looking vessels that seemed designed for war rather than exploration. Their hulls were dark and scarred, as if they had seen considerable combat. The largest ship was enormous, easily 5 kilometers long and bristling with what looked like weapon emplacements. Its design was both primitive and sophisticated, like someone had taken ancient concepts and refined them to perfection. "Are those weapons?" asked Saran quietly. "Unknown," replied the sensor operator. "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. But if they are weapons, they're powered down as promised." Laren studied the ships carefully. Despite their warlike appearance, they moved with precise discipline. Their formation was perfect. Their approach vectors calculated to minimize any possible threat to the station. Whoever commanded these vessels was clearly skilled in military tactics. "They're requesting permission to dock," the communications officer reported. "The lead ship is asking to send a small delegation aboard our station." "Granted," Lyron said, "but maintain full security protocols. I want security teams standing by, but keep them out of sight. We don't want to appear hostile, but we need to be prepared for anything." The largest human ship moved slowly toward the station's main docking bay. As it approached, Lyran could see more details of its construction. The hull was covered in sensor arrays and communication equipment, but also in what were unmistakably defensive systems. This was a ship built by a species that expected trouble. An hour later, Lyran stood in the station's main conference room, waiting for her first glimpse of humanity. The docking had proceeded smoothly, with the human ship systems interfacing perfectly with Federation technology despite their apparent differences. The door opened, and 3 figures entered the room. The first thing Lyran noticed was how similar they looked to several species she knew. 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head. But there were subtle differences that marked them as something entirely new. They moved with a predatory grace that reminded her of the great hunters from her homeworld. Their eyes constantly scanned the room, noting exits, potential threats, and defensive positions. The leader was a tall female with short dark hair and intelligent brown eyes. She wore a simple uniform in dark blue with minimal decoration but obvious quality. When she spoke, her voice was calm and controlled, but there was an undertone of strength that suggested she was accustomed to being obeyed. "Ambassador Lyran," she said in careful galactic standard. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth System ship Defiance. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "Captain Chen?" Lyran replied, using the formal greeting gesture of her people. "Welcome to New Thessia. I must say we were quite surprised to receive your transmissions." Sarah smiled, and Lyran was struck by how the expression transformed her face. The predatory alertness remained, but it was overlaid with genuine warmth. "We were equally surprised to discover we were not alone in the galaxy," Sarah said. "We have been exploring space for several centuries without finding any sign of other intelligent life. Learning that there is an entire galactic civilization has been somewhat overwhelming." Lyran gestured for her guests to sit at the conference table. As they did, she noticed how they positioned themselves to have clear views of all entrances while maintaining easy access to their equipment. These were people who had learned to be cautious through hard experience. "If you don't mind me asking," Lyran said, "your ships appear to be designed for combat. Is your species currently at war?" Sarah exchanged glances with her companions before answering. "Not currently, no. But humanity has learned that it is better to be prepared for conflict than to be caught unprepared. Our ships are designed to serve multiple purposes." It was a diplomatic non-answer, but Lyran sensed there was more to the story. The scars on the human ships, the military bearing of their crew, the weapons that were obviously present despite being powered down, all of it suggested a species with considerable experience in warfare. "Perhaps you could tell us about your civilization," Lyran said. "We know very little about your people or your history." Sarah was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Humanity originated on a planet called Earth in the Sol system. We achieved spaceflight approximately 400 years ago and began establishing colonies on other worlds about 3 centuries ago. We currently have settlements in 47 star systems, with a total population of approximately 8 billion. The numbers were impressive, but not extraordinary by galactic standards." What caught Lyran's attention was what Sarah had not said. No mention of wars, conflicts, or the reasons why their ships were so heavily armed. "And your technology?" Lyran asked. "Your ships use fusion drives, which most galactic civilizations abandoned long ago in favor of more efficient systems." "We prefer technologies that are reliable and maintainable," Sarah replied. "Fusion drives may be primitive by your standards, but they work consistently across a wide range of conditions. We have found that sophisticated systems can be vulnerable when you need them most. Again, there was an undertone of hard-won experience in her words. Liren was beginning to understand that humanity's technological choices were not based on ignorance, but on bitter lessons learned through conflict. The meeting continued for several hours, with both sides sharing basic information about their civilizations. The humans were clearly intelligent and sophisticated, despite their preference for what seemed like primitive technology. They had developed advanced mathematics, physics, and engineering. Their understanding of biology and medicine was particularly impressive. But throughout the conversation, Liren could not shake the feeling that she was only seeing the surface of humanity. There were depths to these people that they were not revealing, experiences that had shaped them in ways she did not yet understand. It was near the end of the meeting when Captain Chen mentioned something that made Liren's blood run cold. "We have detected considerable military activity in this region of space," Sarah said casually. "Ships with advanced weaponry moving in organized formations. Is there currently a conflict in this area?" "The hegemony," Liren said, and saw the humans' expressions sharpen with interest. "They are a militant faction that broke away from the Federation 50 years ago. They have been conquering systems and enslaving populations throughout this region." "Enslaving?" Sarah's voice was very quiet, but there was something dangerous in it. "Yes. They capture populations from conquered worlds and use them for forced labor. The Federation has been unable to stop them due to their superior military technology." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The humans' casual friendliness vanished, replaced by something cold and predatory. Liren realized that she had just revealed something that humanity found deeply offensive. "How many systems have they conquered?" asked one of Sarah's companions, a man with scars on his hands and the bearing of a veteran soldier. 67 confirmed, Liren replied. "Possibly more. They tend to attack outer rim colonies where Federation response is limited." Sarah was very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but Liren could sense the fury beneath the surface. "Thank you for the information, Ambassador. We will need to consider this as we plan our integration with galactic civilization." The meeting ended shortly after, with promises of future communication and cooperation. But as Liren watched the humans return to their ship, she could not escape the feeling that she had just made a terrible mistake. The legends in the ancient archives had described humans as dangerous when threatened. She was beginning to suspect that threatening the innocent might be an even greater error. As the human ships departed New Thessia, their fusion drives burning bright against the stars, Liren filed her report with the Federation Council. She described the humans as a peaceful but militaristic species, with advanced technology and significant population. She recommended full diplomatic relations and suggested that humanity could be a valuable ally. But in her private log, she wrote something very different. "Today I met the species from the ancient legends. They call themselves humans, and they are everything the old stories claimed. They are intelligent, adaptive, and undoubtedly dangerous. But what frightens me most is not what they might do to us, but what they might do to our enemies. I fear we have just introduced the galaxy to something it is not prepared for."